Welcome back to Crime Scene 24/7. To our returning subscribers, thank you for always engaging. Your likes, comments, and shares keeps us motivated. And if this is your first time here, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our chilling crime scenes. Here, we dig deep, we investigate hard, and we bring you stories the mainstream left unsaid. So encourage us by engaging in our videos. Subscribe if you haven't, like, comment, and share. The morning of October 18, 2025 began like any other in the quiet blocks of Norwood Avenue in Buffalo, New York. Firefighters from the Buffalo Fire Department answered a call for what appeared to be a routine house fire. Instead, what they found etched across charred walls would unravel into one of the most devastating tragedies the city has seen. Inside the apartment, the body of 29-year-old new mother Kathleen Carrig lay motionless. Beside her, a 4-day-old infant named Noah Carrig. Her son had also perished. Their partner, 30-year-old Kidane Haile, an employee at the University at Buffalo, was discovered alive in the wreckage, treated for smoke inhalation and later taken into custody. From the outset, investigators found evidence suggesting the fire was no accident. The Erie County District Attorney's Office announced that Katie Carrig's death was ruled a homicide. The medical examiner determined she died from asphyxia due to strangulation. The infant's cause of death remained under investigation, though prosecutors indicated further charges were likely. And what investigators discovered about the man behind the trigger stunned even detectives. Haile, prosecutors allege, purposely strangled Katie Carrig, then set the fire in the apartment on the 400 block of Norwood Avenue around 8:35 a.m. that Sunday. The impact stretched beyond the loss of 2 precious lives. The home sustained roughly $100,000 in damage, and the quiet veneer of the neighborhood was shattered. In court, Haile was arraigned on 1 count of second-degree murder and held without bail, facing a maximum sentence of 25 years to life if convicted. His plea: not guilty. As the city scrambled to absorb the horror, friends and family remembered Katie as a devoted mother and loving person whose life had just begun with her newborn in her arms. Meanwhile, the university where Haile worked issued a brief statement, aware of the charges but unable to comment on specifics, though it said it had a disciplinary process for employees accused of criminal conduct. What follows in this few minutes video is a chronology told from official records, eyewitness accounts, and the voices of those left behind. We trace the final hours of Katie's life, the frantic response of firefighters, the investigators combing through the charred wreckage, and the courtroom where justice seeks its measure. We ask, how could everything change so quickly? And how does a young mother and her newborn go from a new dawn to a final dusk? Stay with us as we open the file, turn over the facts, listen to the family, and attempt to understand the sorrow that lingers in the wake of lives ended too soon. The early morning light filtered through the windows of the modest apartment on the 400 block of Norwood Avenue in Buffalo, illuminating the quiet stillness that had settled. Firefighters arrived at approximately 8:35 a.m. on October 18, 2025, to a first-floor blaze that would quickly evolve into a grim investigation. Meanwhile, investigators from the Erie County District Attorney's Office and the Buffalo Police Department gathered evidence. They reviewed the charred remains of the apartment and took custody of the man who had been rescued from the ashes, treated for smoke inhalation, and now faced serious questions about the moments preceding the fire. In the subsequent hours, the medical examiner determined that 29-year-old Kathleen Carrig had died not from fire or smoke, but from asphyxia due to strangulation. This before the flames ever took hold. The 4-day-old infant, Noah, lay silent beside her, his cause of death still under investigation, a young life extinguished before barely beginning. The man in custody, 30-year-old Kidane Haile, a financial aid advisor at the University at Buffalo, was indicted later that week on 1 count of second-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty and remains held without bail as authorities prepare to bring further charges related to the death of the infant. Detectives described their challenge: a fire scene layered with the trauma of loss, the wreckage of what should have been a new chapter, and the unraveling of time leading to October 18th. They combed through debris, questioned neighbors, analyzed surveillance, and pieced together a timeline of the last hours of Katie and her baby. Every charred surface, every scent of gasoline, every fractured moment held clues. Katie's family, friends, and the community in Buffalo now faced the unimaginable. Her recent joy at motherhood, the soft coos of a 4-day-old named Noah, and suddenly the absence of both. The neighbors who once waved hello, the dog Stella waiting for afternoon walks, the baby's tiny fingers, gone in an instant. The local fire department's own behavioral health team responded, acknowledging how especially hard it is when a child is a victim. As the investigation continues, hours of testimony, forensic reports, and fire science experts are being assembled. Investigators have confirmed gasoline was likely used to ignite the apartment after Katie's death. And the imprint of grief remains, not only in medical reports but in the lull of a neighborhood silenced, the unanswered questions hovering in halls that once held laughter and lullabies. We now move deeper into the case, exploring the lives of Katie and Haile, their relationship in the months leading up to October 18th, the background of the apartment, and how this home, once a shelter for a new mother and her newborn, became the scene of heartbreak. In the months leading up to that fateful morning of October 18, 2025, the relationship between Kathleen "Katie" Carrig and Kidane Haile appeared, to friends and acquaintances, to follow a familiar, hopeful path. Katie, age 29, had recently become a mother, her son Noah just 4 days old, and the joy of new life seemed to envelop their home. Haile, age 30, was working at University at Buffalo as a financial aid advisor, described in local statements as having a promising career and a stable presence in his community. Katie's social circles painted a picture of someone deeply committed to her newborn and striving to build a fresh chapter. Those who knew her spoke of late-night feedings, joyful first cries, and the kaleidoscope of emotions that come with welcoming a new life. Her family remembered her as enthusiastic about motherhood and filled with plans for the future. Meanwhile, Haile's colleagues spoke of him as professional and composed, unaware, or dismissive of any domestic tension simmering beneath the surface. But investigators uncovered subtle indicators that all was not as it seemed. In the days immediately preceding the incident, there were signs of a disturbance. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices, arguments, abrupt silences, one night in the apartment on the 400 block of Norwood Avenue. Although none of the alleyway chatter flagged as a formal complaint, it added to the mosaic of concern. When detectives searched the apartment, they found traces of accelerant, consistent with gasoline, placed near the stairwell, and signs that the fire had been started deliberately. Court documents state that the male roommate, Haile, was treated for smoke inhalation and injuries at the hospital before being released and taken into custody. He sits in the Erie County Holding Center without bail, awaiting further charges beyond the one count of second-degree murder already filed in Katie's death. Prosecutors have indicated the intention to file a superseding indictment relating to the death of the infant, Noah. Katie's father, in a statement to local news media, described his daughter's enthusiasm just days before, how she held her baby and smiled, how she envisioned a shared future with Haile and their child. The grief in his voice, the raw sorrow of a proud parent turned mournful herald. It resonated across the community. As the fire investigators sifted through ash and sorrow, they unearthed more than charred wood. They discovered the unfinished dreams of a young mother and her newborn, the stark contrast between what should have been and what tragically was. Now we turn the lens toward that last weekend. The errands, the preparations for Katie's first week with her baby, the quiet morning of October 18th when every plan shattered. We reconstruct the events hour by hour using 911 logs, witness statements, and forensic timelines. We listen to the silent echoes of a lullaby never sung, and ask how a home filled with hope became the setting of heartbreak. The funeral home's marquee bore the name of Kathleen "Katie" Carrig in letters that felt too heavy for a life so young. Friends gathered for the service, enveloped by grief so deep it seemed to press against the walls of the chapel. Katie, 29 years old, had held her newborn son only 4 days. Baby Noah, his tiny body still so new to the world. Their absence reverberated not just within the family, but throughout the neighborhood they had hoped to call home. Obituaries described Katie as gentle-spirited, devoted to motherhood, and tender with the dog she doted on, Stella. Her parents spoke of late cuddles, soft lullabies in the early hours, a nursery painted in pastel hues for the child they had longed to hold. The local community recalled her warm waves to neighbors, her calls about feeding schedules, her wide-eyed optimism. Now every dream she voiced stands frozen in those colors and echoes. As the building on the 400 block of Norwood Avenue gradually returned to silence, investigators combed for the moment when life shifted. They verified that Katie's death preceded the fire, ruled by the medical examiner as homicide due to asphyxia by strangulation. The infant's cause of death remains under scrutiny. Prosecutors announced their intent to file additional charges, noting that the case is far from closed. In hushed tones, the firefighters who first ventured into the apartment described the ache of knowing they were too late. The staircase still bore its fatal scar from the blaze. The hallway held the faint scent of gasoline, and in the scorched living room, the absence of a newborn's coo underscored all that was lost. One veteran fire commissioner admitted that when a child is a victim, the toll on responders lingers longer than any charred surface.
Meanwhile, Kidane Haile, 30, remains in custody, held without bail on charges of second-degree murder after pleading not guilty. Prosecutors say he strangled Katie before igniting the fire in their shared apartment. Friends of Haile say he had held promise, worked as a financial aid advisor at the University at Buffalo, and seemed stable on the surface. But investigators now say that facade masked a loss beyond return. The nursery stands empty. The mobile above the crib no longer spins. The dog waits at the doorstep for a family that will not return home. And the city of Buffalo holds its breath, grappling with a story that began with joy and ended too soon. In the hours following that grim morning in Buffalo, the scale of the investigation began to unfold. Investigators from the Erie County District Attorney's Office announced that on October 23, 2025, an indictment was returned against 30-year-old Kidane Haile, charging him with one count of second-degree murder for the death of 29-year-old Kathleen Carrig. The official public statement confirmed that the fire at the apartment on the 400 block of Norwood Avenue in Buffalo on October 18th at approximately 8:35 a.m. led to the discovery of Katie and her 4-day-old son, Noah, both pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner's office determined that Katie's death was caused by asphyxia due to strangulation, thereby ruling it a homicide rather than a fatality of the fire itself. Meanwhile, the cause of death of the infant, Noah, remains under investigation, and prosecutors announced their intent to file additional charges related to his death. As part of their investigation, authorities revealed evidence indicating the fire had been deliberately set. According to court documents and official statements, gasoline or another accelerant was used in the stairwell or common area of the apartment building, supporting the theory that the fire was meant to conceal the earlier homicide. At his arraignment, Haile pleaded not guilty and was ordered held without bail. The impact on first responders was acknowledged publicly. The Buffalo Fire Department behavioral health team responded to the scene, recognizing the profound effect conversations like these have when the victims include a newborn. The community too absorbed a deep shock. The parents of Katie and acquaintances of Haile issued quiet statements of grief and bewilderment, emphasizing that none foresaw such an outcome for a young mother in the early days of parenthood. Investigators now sift through hours of surveillance footage, cell phone logs, and the sequence of 911 calls, aiming to reconstruct the final hours of Katie's life, the infant's final moments, and what preceded the breakdown of the apartment's safety into tragedy. The courthouse is preparing for what promises to be a complex prosecution, gathering forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and expert fire scene reconstruction. In the meantime, the grieving family awaits answers, the baby's cradle lies untouched, and the neighborhood still remembers the ripple of this loss. The courtroom was suffused with quiet tension as prosecutors from the Erie County District Attorney's Office laid out their case against 30-year-old Kidane Haile, the former university financial aid advisor now accused of committing the unthinkable. They described how evidence collected from the apartment on the 400 block of Norwood Avenue in Buffalo, NY, revealed a path of destruction that began long before the flames flickered. Inside the charred apartment, investigators discovered more than burned furnishings. They uncovered signs consistent with intentional ignition, including use of gasoline-like accelerant documented by fire scene experts. According to the medical examiner, the victim, 29-year-old Kathleen Carrig, had died from asphyxia due to strangulation before the fire began. At the same time, the 4-day-old baby, named Noah, lay lifeless, his cause of death still under investigation. A grim sign that this case would broaden far beyond a house fire to something prosecutors described as intentional. The damage to the building was estimated at around $100,000, underscoring the scale of what appeared to be more than a domestic incident. Both the fire department and city officials spoke publicly about the emotional toll. The Buffalo Fire Department Behavioral Health Team responded, acknowledging that the loss of an infant in such a scene leaves marks invisible to the naked eye. Meanwhile, community leaders honored Katie's memory and expressed collective grief for a life so recently begun and so tragically ended. As the case moves forward, prosecutors have signaled they will seek additional charges related to the infant's death and that the investigation remains active. The father's arraignment ended with him being held without bail, his future now entwined with the unanswered questions of the fire, the death, and the shattered promise of a new life. Now, we remain with the echoes of a lullaby never sung, the smoke-stained walls of a nursery untouched, and the weight of a community grappling with a heartbreak none of them expected. The official announcement came on October 24, 2025, as the University at Buffalo released a statement expressing heartfelt condolences to those who are grieving the horrific loss of loved ones this past weekend. The university acknowledged that employee Kidane Haile, age 30, was under criminal investigation, but said it could not comment on personnel matters, adding that a robust disciplinary process is in place and that counseling support would be offered to staff. At the news conference, Michael Keene, district attorney for Erie County, detailed the building damage estimate of around $100,000 and reiterated that investigators believe the fire was intentionally set with gasoline after the homicide of Kathleen Carrig, age 29. He emphasized that a superseding indictment relating to the infant's death was expected in the very near future. Community leaders also spoke. Acting Buffalo Mayor Christopher Scanlon conveyed that though he did not know Katie personally, he had familial ties to the Carrig family and affirmed, "This community has lost one heck of a person." The response kept circulating among neighbors of the Norwood Avenue block, some of whom said they still can't reconcile the April weekend calm with the October tragedy. On the investigative front, detectives have indicated that they are analyzing the suspect's cell phone records, the 911 logs from the morning of October 18th, and security footage from nearby properties. The goal: reconstruct every moment from the last hours of Katie's life to the ignition of the blaze, and to establish how the infant Noah met his end. Prosecutors say the case remains active and evolving. As the official machinery of justice moves forward, the sorrow of the Carrig family resonates across Buffalo. A young mother, a newborn child, a hope that turned into heartbreak, and now a courtroom prepares to weigh in on what happened on that fateful October morning. The next hearing for Kidane Haile remains unscheduled, but court officials confirm that preparations are underway for a superseding indictment tied to the death of the infant, Noah Carrig, whose cause of death is still under investigation. Prosecutors continue to meticulously review conflicting witness statements and timeline data, including 911 dispatch logs and nearby surveillance footage, to piece together the hours leading up to the fire on the 400 block of Norwood Avenue. Meanwhile, the neighborhood has shifted. Residents describe the block as quieter, edges of normalcy blurred by what happened that morning. For many in the local community, the tragedy has sparked conversations about domestic safety and the hidden signs of crisis. For the Carrig family, each day carries the weight of absence. Rooms once filled with baby coos now silent, photos yet to be taken, lullabies unsung. For law enforcement, the work presses on. Every detail matters. A footstep, a timestamp, a flame pattern. And for those who mourn Katie and her baby,
the hope remains for answers and accountability. As our cameras fade to black on this chapter of the tragedy in Buffalo, we invite you, the audience of Crime Scene 24/7, to pause with us and reflect, not just on the facts, but on what lingers in the silence that follows. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you don't miss any updates, because this case isn't closed. If you or someone you know is affected by intimate partner violence, or if the signs of danger ever whisper in the quiet of everyday life, please reach out to trusted support lines and professionals. The details we've shared here go beyond headlines. They reflect loss, shattered futures, and the urgent need for vigilance and compassion. In our next installment, we'll dig deeper into the forensic evidence, the investigators' timeline, and the voices of those who knew 29-year-old Kathleen Carrig and her 4-day-old son Noah, and the man charged 30-year-old Kidane Haile. Stay with us as we continue to follow the trail.